You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Hi, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, the podcast where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your host, Leanne Lightford, the president of Training Pros. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company. At Training Pros, we like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us find you the consultant to start your project with confidence. I'm really excited about my guest today. We're departing a little bit from the norm. This is a learning leader at a large company, but he's also an author of a book coming out in June, which is probably when this podcast will be released. Excited to welcome Dr. Keating, Chief Learning and Development Officer at BDO Canada. Welcome, Dr. Keating.
Hello, Leanne. It is a true pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm excited about this. So, before we get started on looking at your book, can you just kind of share with our listeners a 60-second overview of who you are and what you do?
Who am I? I like walks on the beach and warm summer evenings. My name is Keating. I've spent the past, almost 30 years working in learning and development, everything from frontline roles to global positions. As you said, today I serve as the Chief Learning Development Officer for BDO. I also work with University of Pennsylvania's Chief Learning Officer doctoral program. I am the father of these two babies. So the Trusted Learning Advisor and Hidden Value, how to reveal the impact of organizational learning. My passion lies in helping L&D practitioners stop defending their worth and start amplifying their impact. And ultimately, I believe that learning changes lives, and it's one of the most powerful tools that we have to unlock our potential, to drive performance, create lasting value. And I'll share with you one fun fact. Once upon a time, I was a backup dancer for a famous singer. My 60 seconds are up. Can't answer who. Next time.
Okay. Well, there was so many things in there I'd love to explore, but the biggest takeaway that just stuck with me, because I've heard you talk many times, is I don't know how you look so young for someone who's been in the field 30 years.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I started when I was 5.
there you go. That's what I say to people when, they meet my adult children. They're like, gosh, I was like, oh, I had them when I was 12.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I love to ask people is, what about learning and development attracted you, or how did you end up here in learning development?
I can't say that I was attracted to it, unfortunately, because I didn't even know it existed. Like so many of us in L&D, I didn't set out to pursue this path. It found me, thankfully. So at the time, I was a high school dropout. I had nothing on my resume but fast food jobs, and I was flipping through the help wanted ads in the newspaper because I'm that old. Once upon a time, kids, you had to go to the newspaper, and it was Sunday because Sunday had the best jobs. And I saw a posting for a Microsoft Office trainer role. And I thought, well, I know Office. How hard could it be to teach it? Turns out it's not that easy. And I was terrible at it, but they needed somebody with a pulse, and I had a pulse. And so at first, it was really just a job. It was something to pay the bills. But about 6 months in, everything changed for me. I was helping somebody learn a task, and it was in Excel, and I saw something happen with them, and I saw the light go on in their eyes. And it was this quiet, powerful moment for me where something clicked. And in that instant, I realized that I was contributing, that I was helping someone. And it was one of the first times that I felt like I actually had value. And that moment really lit a spark for me. It made me feel like maybe I was worth something after all. And it wasn't It wasn't just about this software anymore. It was more about transformation and growth and impact. I didn't see all of that at the time. I just knew that I felt really good for one of the first times. And so that was the beginning of the job. And then eventually it evolved into being a career. And then that career became a calling and it became a passion. And it started because I had to teach myself how to learn. Nobody had ever really taught me that. And I finished school, dropped out towards the end of ninth grade. And when I was doing this other teaching, this was the .com boom and HTML and Flash and Dreamweaver and everything was coming out so quickly that every week I was given a new topic to go and teach. And in order for me to teach it, I first had to teach it to myself. And then I realized that one of my gifts is being able to take a topic I don't know, teaching it to myself, learning it, and then I can disseminate it back in a way that people can understand it. And for me, that unlocked my capability, my potential. And I learned that learning really changed the trajectory of my life. And that's why I'm so passionate about it today, because I know firsthand that learning doesn't just change the workplaces, it changes people. It changed me. And in fact, I'll share with you. So for those listening, I'm holding up a post-it note that says, "Learning changes lives." And I have kept this post-it note, maybe not the same one, but I've kept this on a post-it note for years next to or on my laptop to remind me of when those moments get tough in L&D. Why do we fight this good fight? Because learning changes lives. That's what we do. So learning found me, luckily, mentally, emotionally, and now I'm part of this illustrious career where learning, industry not career, where learning gets to change lives.
That is a beautiful story. And you're right. So many of us just kind of accidentally find our way there and find something about it, like that spark you talked about, that just makes us passionate about this field. I find very few people leave this field once they find it. It just seems to be where we want to stay once we get here.
There's so much goodness that we can do when we have the chance or when we make the chance and the opportunity for us to actually do our job and jump over all these hurdles that are put in front of us, because it's not always easy, but we can have true value and true impact.
That's a wonderful story and a great segue. This is, you sent me an advanced copy of your book, and I have to tell you, I am so excited about what I read in here. I could literally do a whole podcast on like the first 4 chapters, one podcast per chapter. It is so full of amazing advice. So let's start talking about what people will find, what they'll learn, what they'll take away from this book. First, let's find out, why did you decide to write a book about value creation?
I believe that we're standing at a crossroads, not just as learn development practitioners, but as a global workforce. My opinion is that we are evolving from what has long been known as a knowledge economy or a skills economy into something very different. We're evolving into a value economy. So, in a knowledge economy where we're measured by what we know, but let's be honest, this device has more knowledge than I will ever have. Knowledge is no longer a differentiator. The question now is how you use tools like your smartphone, like Gen AI, collaboration, creativity, learning. How do you use all these tools at our disposal to create value? Value creation is the new currency. And it's not just for L&D, it's for every business unit. In fact, I started initially writing the book about the value economy in general. And then as I was writing it, I just kept putting everything back to L&D because that's where my heart is. And so I was like, you know what, we'll just write this for us, but it's really transferable across the board. And what we do in talent development has tremendous value. shape capabilities, we drive adaptability, we unlock human potential. But that value is often hidden, or it's misunderstood, or it's under-leveraged. And I wanted to give our profession the language, the tools, the frameworks to help uncover that value on our own terms and to help us prepare for what's coming next. And I mean by that, it's not just to survive this shift, but to lead it. Because if you think about organizations, businesses, firms, they exist for one purpose: making money. We can be as altruistic as we want to, but the minute that business doesn't make money, isn't creating value, the business probably isn't going to stick around. So every organization, every business is looking at it in terms of value. So why shouldn't we also be looking at the value that we can create or should be creating? Imagine a future where we're not just thought of as just training or just L&D, but we're thought of as value seekers, as value creators. That's why I wrote the book, is to help create the language, the tools to help us think differently about what we do, who we are, so that we can start to embrace this idea of being value creators, value seekers for the value economy.
That is great. What I'm going to tell you, I brought from, so just to get it out there verbally, it's called Hidden Value: How to Reveal the Impact of Organizational Learning. When I first saw the title and started reading it, I thought it was going to be another book on how to measure and show the value of training. And it's not. You're giving us a a specific blueprint on at, at the high level, how to think like a CEO to create value using learning and development and engagement. But you're not just thinking in terms of what are they learning, you're thinking in terms of all the different stakeholders and all the different ways that companies look at value and how we can contribute to all of those things.
Yeah, double clicking down and then also going up. There's already tons of measurement approaches. We have ROI, we have Phillips, we have Kirkpatrick, we have Brinkerhoff. We a lot that exists. I don't want to create a new measurement model. I want us to take a step back in how we're thinking about value. So one of the tools in the book is the value creation compass. And so I look at 4 quadrants of where value is created for organizations. And then I break down how we create value in those quadrants so that when you're telling the story, when you're capturing the data, when you're looking at the impact, the output, or the behaviors that have been changed, you can categorize it within these 4 categories that every firm, business organization is looking at in terms of value creation.
Yes. And I won't give away the whole value creation compass because that was one of the things that I went, oh, this is great. But it's a 4-point compass model, but the true north is empowering people, which is what all people in L&D think of all the time. But the rest of it, as a business owner, like these are all the things that I am looking at all the time. And when I realized if we can have L&D leaders making sure that we're always looking at all these other points on the compass, we don't ever have to face being the first laid off again.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Well, because the departments that create value do not get laid off. Another point that I saw in here that I really thought was interesting was you didn't dismiss the tried and true measurement models. I don't even know how many decades Kirkpatrick model has been around, but you didn't dismiss them. You went through and talked through each of them and the value and when you would use them to measure and the things that they bring, and then you build on it. And again, just one chapter is in here on measuring. The rest is all about creating value.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the call out because it's not to demean or cut down any of the OGs. And I mean, Kirkpatrick is an OG, Philip is an OG. They've been around for a really long time and they work in the right context.
Uh-huh.
I want people to have that baseline awareness. It's like I talked about in the Trusted Learner Advisor, your toolkit. Our job is to have the biggest toolkit possible. It means I need to understand Thalheimer's LTEM model, Kirkpatrick, Phillips, Brinker case methodology. Doesn't mean that I'm using every single one of those tools every single time. The same with your toolkit. I want individuals to know the tools that exist, but then also how do you superpower, amp up, enhance using those tools and think a little bit differently? Because I feel like where we've gotten a bit lazy is just stopping at Kirkpatrick or stopping at Phillips. There are different ways that we can look at value because no one outside of L&D knows who the heck Kirkpatrick is. No CFO is ever going to accept our ROI equation and use that on their financial statements because we're not speaking the same language. We can't truly demonstrate that value that we're trying to prove when we use just the ROI model. So there are different ways that we can look at it. And that's my intention is to raise awareness about those other lenses to look at value from.
Yes. And I couldn't agree with you more on all of those points. You also talk a lot about storytelling and how we can use storytelling to show our value, show how we have created value. Can you talk any about that with us?
Absolutely. In my doctoral research, I was studying chief financial officers, and I wanted to understand what their belief was about the value of learn and development. And the reason is part of the CFO's role is to understand the value of every business unit. Now, I'd been in the field for about 21 years, and at that time, I'd never had a conversation with the CFO. So, and I've been the head of learning for several organizations. So, if the CFO's role is to define the value of every business unit, and no CFO has ever talked to me, then how are they defining the value of L&D? No wonder we can be so quick to be cut because they just don't know. So that is what inspired me to do my doctoral research around that. In the conversations with CFOs during my research, I've heard quite often, do not send me the Excel spreadsheet with your data. I don't know how to read it, and it doesn't mean anything to me. Tell me the story. Tell me about the people that you are helping, that you're impacting. Tell me about the people who were promoted as a result, or tell me about the processes that were impacted, or the behaviors that were changed. Tell me who. Put the face behind it. Put the heart behind it. We struggle with telling stories. And by the way, storytelling has been our first form of communication for however many thousands and thousands of years that humans have been around. That's how we started. We lose sight of that. One CFO told me, I have so many fires at my feet. I don't care about what you're doing. I can't care. You have to make me care. And that stuck with me and it resonated with me because we take this personal that our budgets are cut or that we have a small team, or we take it personal that nobody cares. But we're being a little bit sensitive in that standpoint because we have to take a step back. They don't care not because they don't want to, but because they have their own stuff going on. It's not their job necessarily to care. It's our job to make them care. Just like that CFO said, so many fires at my feet. I got to worry about those, not what you're doing unless you make me care. So we have to make them care. And storytelling is one of the ways that we can make people care when we're bringing what we're doing to life and we're humanizing it.
That's very impactful because that is something we are taught is you have to prove your value and, you're right. I don't remember ever sitting down with the CFO when I was a learning leader. I, again, if I could go back in time with this book, I probably would have been promoted to the C-suite quickly. I also really enjoyed you did a chapter on conquering obstacles. And why I love that was because you're basically saying, okay, you're probably in your head as you're reading this going, yes, but that's why I can't. And you did a whole chapter just you're going through obstacle after obstacle and how to conquer it. And I was like, Wow. Now they can't say yes, but.
That's what I should have called the chapter. Yes, but.
Well, you hear that a lot, right? Yes, but, yes, and, or
I
whatever.
do. And
Um,
one comment I'll make that I try to repeat anywhere I can where anyone will listen is, as an industry, we have a tendency to generalize. We have a tendency to listen to somebody talk about their experience and they were like, well, that's not our experience and that's not how it works. And why doesn't it work for me that way? And what we have to remember is everything that we do is contextualized to our organization. There is very few generalizations that can apply for everyone across the board. What I did at General Motors didn't work at Archwell. What I'm doing at BDO didn't work at Archwell or HSBC. Everything is contextualized to the culture of that organization. You can read every book out there, including mine. You can get all the certifications. You can go to an organization and you can still not be successful. Why? Because the culture hasn't set you up for success. Because maybe the executive leadership doesn't believe in learning and development. So we have to get out of this headspace that there is a silver bullet, there's a quick solution, there's something that's going to apply across the board. Oh, I heard Keith talking about this. Well, it doesn't work for me. It might not. It might not work for your organization. You have to take a step back and you have to truly evaluate what's the maturity of the learning culture in my organization? What's the learning maturity of the senior leadership team? What's the learning maturity of my own team? Am I the only one that has this experience, or is the team showing up as a rock star team and they understand the science of learning and they're strategic business partner consultants, or is everyone just an order taker and I'm the only non-order taker? There are so many nuances that you have to look at to explore that are out of our control for determining our success. So I just want to reiterate, in no way am I saying, hey, read these 2 books and you're not going to have any problems. I face problems all the time. I'm still treated as an order taker from time to time. But I think of it like this. If you're a doctor or you're a nurse, you're never going to wake up one day and say, oh, I hope when I go to work today, there's no problems. That's literally their job every day, is to be solving problems for humans. Now, in no way am I trying to compare us to doctors and nurses. I'm just giving a metaphor or analogy that it's the same for us. We're going to always wake up and have problems to deal with. That's why we exist. There are some days I'm treated like a CLO. There are other days where the pendulum has swung back and I'm still treated like an order taker. That's okay. I use my skills to change the conversation, to determine how I respond when I'm treated like an order taker. So, long story short, it is all about the context of your own situation and your own organization. If you go to ATD or you go to TICE and you're sitting there in someone's presentation and you're thinking, oh God, that's not how it works for me, I must be really bad. It may not have anything to do with you. Like I said, I've been in situations where I've done everything that should be right, but the organization simply was not ready. We were not supported by leadership, and there was no learning culture. So we've got a lot of these influences that are outside of our control. So keep that in your mind when the going gets tough, and it will get tough. Remember, ultimately, learning changes lives. And for me, in my head, I'm like, look, if I impacted one person this whole year, that's a success.
it's a wonderful thought. If you could help one person have that light bulb moment, your life is a success this year. I love that, and I'm sure that you've had a lot more than one person this year have a light bulb moment, because I have to say, just reading their new book gave me my light bulb moment. So there's your one success.
Thank you.
Okay. So one of the questions I ask on this podcast is, I ask them to recommend a book that they think learning leaders should read. And your previous book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, comes up quite often. So kudos on that. But for all of those folks who have already read The Trusted Learning Advisor, what are they going to get out of hidden value that they didn't get in the first book?
Great question. If you've read Trusted Learning Advisor, you'll recognize hidden value as the next natural step in your evolutionary journey as a learning practitioner. So the Trusted Learning Advisor was really about our transformation, both in breadth and depth, from order taker to strategic business partner. My intention was to challenge us to shift how we think, how we show up, how we engage, how we build relationships. It was about building credibility and fostering trust. And this sounds like a commercial for the book. It's not. Hidden value builds on that foundation. And it assumes that you've already begun the transformation and that now you're ready to show the impact of what you do. Hidden value focuses on the visibility and the amplification of our work. And it's not about the theory of being valuable. It's about uncovering, articulating, operationalizing that value so that it resonates with the business. My goal is to tackle the hard questions. How do you measure what matters? How do you prove your contribution when metrics aren't always valuable? Because they're not always valuable. And most importantly, how do you lead in this new value economy where what matters most isn't knowledge, but what you do with it? So if Trusted Learning Advisor was a mindset shift, then I'll call hidden value the movement.
Okay. I think that honestly, I couldn't recommend this book more highly. So I think that it's probably going to be flying off the shelves of Amazon. But let's shift to the future a little bit. You've kind of touched on it, but where do you see learning and development heading in the next few years?
Before I talk about where we're headed, let's go back in time to 2020. So it's what, like May, June-ish, 2020. Okay. And it's hard to believe that 2020 was only 5 years ago. I almost remember exactly where I was to the day. So we were deep in the chaos of COVID. We're still scrambling to adapt. It was like, it's only going to be 2 weeks, two more, and two more, and two more. And we're trying to get people connected. I don't even think I knew what Zoom was in 2020. And then all of a sudden, we all have accounts. We're living on Zoom. We're keeping people engaged. We're trying to learn in a world where none of us had planned for. And really, let's be honest, not a single person in 2020 knew that 2, 3 years later, Gen AI would now be the next seismic disruption that was waiting right around the corner for us. So the reason I say that is we all remember where we were 5 years ago. None of us expected to be where we are today, particularly with Gen AI and just all the chaos in the world. That's why I'm cautious about predictions. Too often, predictions feel like clickbait. It's like oversimplified sound bites for headlines. And that's one of the reasons I push back on this phrase that I thoroughly dislike, future proof. Future proof. Oh, come to this class and we're going to help you future proof. You cannot future proof anything. We are living in a time of constant disruption, and the pace is only accelerating. And what we can do is we can future prepare, or we can try and future ready ourselves for what might come, but we can't future proof anything. So, with that, where do I see us heading in the next 5 years? I have no clue. I have no clue, but there are two powerful shifts that I see happening right now that I believe will accelerate and we'll continue to see within those next 5 years. And I'm not talking about Gen AI. That's obvious. Genie's out of the bottle, not going back in. But the first direction I've already shared a little bit about, and that's the value economy, where our worth is not defined by what we know. It's defined by what we do with it. And every learning initiative needs to be aligned to business outcomes, and it needs to be seen through the lens of value creation. And yes, I do happen to know a book that talks about that. So that's direction number one, is value economy. The second direction is a bit more existential. I believe that the name learning and development by itself, L&D, will not survive. I don't know if it's 5 years, but that's the direction that we're headed in. And it's not because what we do is irrelevant. It's because how we define ourselves has to evolve. Gen AI is already disrupting traditional content creation, delivery, even some instructional design. But I'm not worried about my job because the future doesn't belong to job titles. It doesn't belong to these little boxes that we try and put ourselves in. I don't define myself by it. The future belongs to those who create value. And so for me, I don't really define myself by L&D. If you were to meet me on the street, I would tell you I'm a problem solver who uses learning as one of the tools to solve many human challenges. I'm an organizational connector. I'm a strategic planner, partner. Because sometimes the solution is learning. Sometimes it's change management. Sometimes it's culture, workflow design. Sometimes it's just being an ear. It's being a therapist and listening to the person and maybe helping them connect to somebody else. Half of what I do is not even learning stuff at all. And that's exactly why I will remain relevant. The three most dangerous words in any organization: not my job. You will never hear me say not my job. Hopefully, you'll never hear my team say not my job. What you will hear is how can I help? And that mindset, the willingness to pivot, to stretch, to serve, which is what trusted learning advisors do, that's what will keep us future ready no matter what comes next. And like I said, I'm asked to do things that are not L&D, not training. I do them. I do them to serve, to be of value. So yes, L&D as a function may evolve beyond recognition. And we hear a lot of clickbait about, oh, L&D is going to go away, training's going to go away. Maybe the title of it, maybe the box that you're trying to sit in by saying, this is the only thing that I do. But as long as people have problems, and people will always have problems. So as long as organizations have problems and have people in those organizations, our role, whatever you're going to call it, we will always have a place to help those people.
Very thorough answer. Thank you. I love it. All right. So you're going to be, for the next few months, probably promoting your book at different conferences and events. Would you tell us a few of the events we can see you at the next
Yes.
few months?
Yeah, I'll be hitting the road for Hidden Value, and I would love to connect in person. So I'll be speaking at ATD Atlanta event on August 14th. I'll be in Dallas in November for Training Pros. And then this next piece is a little bit of a secret, so don't tell anybody. But I'll be the keynote speaker at DevLearn this year. And of course, the best way to see me is bring me into your organization for a keynote or a learning experience event centered around the book. Or if you're ready to level up your strategic influence, we have a trusted learning advisor workshop. Wink, wink.
Fantastic. Yes. And I couldn't agree more. I have had Dr. Keating come to events for training pros and give a talk about his book. And it was standing room only, people trying to get up and talk to him and get the book signed, and definitely worthwhile. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been a great guest. This has been an amazing conversation. As my thank you to you, our charity at Training Pros is to plant trees around the world. So we'd like to plant 5 trees in your name as a thank you for your time you've taken to be a guest on our show.
My pleasure. And aligns with the cover of the book as well, because we are like the roots of trees where you don't see them, but they're doing a lot of the work, most of the work to keep that tree alive. So with that, thank you very much for having me as a guest and for creating space for us to continue to learn and grow as humans.
Thank you so much. Well, that does it for this week's episode of Learning Leader Spotlight. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you tune in next week to hear more from another learning leader in another industry.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.